By 2009, the concept of archetypes was still in its infancy. The Duel Monsters era didn't explore the idea of an archetype too deeply, with Gravekeepers being a notable exception. It wasn't until the GX era that archetypes could be explored more, with strategies like Hero, Six Samurai, Gladiator Beasts, and Lightsworns coming from the period as noteworthy contenders in the meta, while others being introduced as well, like Dark World, Volcanic, and Crystal Beasts just being a few. With that being said, there were a ton of archetypes to never take off competitively, at least immediately, with a lot of these archetypes coming from the anime. Early on into 5Ds, however, one of the earliest archetypes to appear in the anime would become a very quick meta contender to top both SJC and YCS tournaments that would last for several years, and to this day you may see some play at a regional level at a bare minimum, even though it probably won't do that person very good since Blackwings are considered garbage, unfortunately. This deck, introduced on March 3rd, 2009 to the TCG, is, as I just said, known as the Blackwing archetype. Blackwings are an archetype composed of dark winged beasts, whose game plan is to swarm the field with as many monsters as possible to perform synchro summons. It is one of the first archetypes to focus on what was at the time the fairly new synchro summoning mechanic, and they were able to make the most out of using synchros to become a competitive threat. Whether it would be by its use of generic synchros or those tied to their archetype, Blackwings took advantage of the mechanic to swarm the board with multiple synchro monsters to overwhelm and defeat the opponent. Today, I want to go over the history of the Blackwing archetype from its earliest stages as a deck to where it stands today, while analyzing how the deck has evolved over the years with multiple waves of support. This video took a while to make. I'm sure that you know better than I do at this point, and I'm sure that you know better than I do at this point that it's a long one. My name is Avery, and this is an exhaustive Blackwing archetype retrospective. Blackwings would come out of the gate in Crimson Crisis with 6 cards, including 3 main deck monsters, their first synchro, and a spell and trap each. The monsters were what stood out immediately, with both Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind and Bora the Spear being able to special summon themselves from the hand if you controlled a Blackwing monster already, and Blackwing Sirocco the Dawn being a monster you could normal summon without tribute if you had no monsters. All 3 monsters were easy to get onto the field, but they also came with other good effects and traits as well. Bora simply had piercing damage on it, which combined well with the fact that Sirocco could boost the attack of a Blackwing you control by the attack of all the other Blackwings on the field. Gale also helped add some damage by being able to cut in half the attack and defense of an opponent's monster each turn. Gale was one of the best early Blackwings, since with its special summoning ability, it was also a level 3 tuner to allow for some synchro plays, which combined with Bora could make Blackwing Armor Master. Armor Master is tied to Blackwings due to its requirement for a Blackwing tuner, but it was highly rewarding to summon it. First of all, it couldn't be destroyed by battle, and you took no battle damage from battles involving it, which the former part we were used to on small monsters at the time like Spirit Reaper and Marshmelon, but never on a level 7 with 2500 attack that could be an actual threat in battle. Plus, it was rare to see monsters you didn't have to take damage within battles for. These effects were useful since if Armor Master couldn't defeat a monster in battle, it could instead place a wedge counter on said monster and later remove it to make that monster's stats become 0 for the turn. This wave also had Raptor Wing Strike and Ebon Arrow for the deck, but those rarely if ever saw play because let's be honest, those cards are garbage. Blackwings had a good start, but there wasn't enough there to become a proper deck yet. 3 monsters and a synchro were far from enough during a time when you couldn't run as many non-engine cards as you can now, and it'd hardly even be enough now. Thankfully, Raging Battle would come out a few months later with more support cards to fill out the deck. Blackwing Blizzard the Far North is the archetype's second tuner, a level 2 this time, who cannot be special summoned actually, but upon normal summon it would revive a level 4 or lower Blackwing from your graveyard for a synchro summon. Blackwing Shura the Blue Flame is a secondary level 4 monster that lets you summon any Blackwing with 1500 or less attack from the deck after destroying a monster in battle, which was not difficult to do with an 1800 attack monster in 2009. The monster would have its effects negated, but the important part was the fact that you could summon a body to deal damage with and use it as a synchro material. Speaking of dealing damage, Blackwing Kalut the Moonshadow is iconic in the archetype since it could discard itself when a Blackwing battles to give it a 1400 attack boost for a turn, which made for a decent card in an era where players feared Honest and Lightsworn. And yes, if you can already tell by this point, we're going to be saying Blackwing a lot. So do not take a shot every time I say Blackwing, because probably about another 2 minutes into this video, you will be on the floor. We also have a level 6 synchro in Blackwing Armed Wing, who also needs a Blackwing tuner to summon, but gains 500 attack points when it attacks and deals piercing to guarantee damage over defense mode monsters. Against the Wind is a normal spell that lets you add a Blackwing from your grave to your hand by taking damage equal to its attack, but the noteworthy spell for this support was the continuous spell Black Whirlwind, which lets you search for any Blackwing monster with attack less than the attack of a Blackwing you normal summon, increasing consistency by getting you to cards like Gale or Bora for swarming or Colute to get over a bigger monster. You also had Delta Crow Anti-Reverse for a normal trap that destroys all set spells and traps the opponent controls, and it can be used from the hand if you control exactly 3 Blackwings, being the first trap that lets you use itself from the hand. Now that we have a much bigger archetype with a lot more to work with, Blackwings finally have the tools needed to become a meta strategy. It has swarming, searching, and their own decent synchro to go into if you don't want to use generic monsters. You could of course use generic level 6 monsters like Yugioh Guardian and level 7 monsters like Black Rose and Dark Strike Fighter for generic tools to go into, and a level 5 and 8 synchro are options still as well. The archetype is full of wing beast monsters, meaning it was one of the first to be able to use Icarus attack in the meta efficiently to sacrifice one of your wing beasts to destroy 2 of the opponent's cards. Every monster in the archetype also being dark attribute does mean you could also include cards like Allure of Darkness and Dark Armed Dragon, both of which were still very strong after being hit on the ban list coming out of Teledad format. Blackwings showed out early in their first event in the TCG, winning SJC Indianapolis and later being fully legal for the World Championship, also winning that event in 2009. Performing so strongly at such a high level like Blackwings did at their first SJC and Worlds made the deck a target for a hit on the ban list, but they weren't going to be too harsh to the deck considering they would later have more Blackwings to sell to the player base. Therefore, in September of 2009, after the deck's first format, Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind went straight to 1 to limit the deck from being able to swarm out a tuner. It was also indirectly hit by the banning of Dark Strike Fighter, but that was a hit for every synchro deck OTKing with great ease due to the card. In return, however, Blackwings got a new support piece in Ancient Prophecy with Blackwing Vayu, the Emblem of Honor, for another tuner to add to the deck's arsenal. Vayu was unique, however, since it couldn't be used as a synchro material on the field, but instead you could banish itself and a Blackwing from the graveyard to summon a Blackwing synchro from the extra deck whose level equals the combined levels of the banished monsters, but the summoned monster has its effects negated. While you do sacrifice your monster's effects, you can banish Vayu and Sirocco from the grave to summon Armed Wing, who could also be banished with Vayu to summon Armor Master, and this play would give you a decent beat stick or a potential material for another synchro. In Stardust Overdrive, we would also get Blackwing Silverwind the Ascendant for a target to summon by banishing Vayu and Armor Master for the biggest monster you could summon with this play that you'd play a copy of just so Vayu is live with Armor Master. The hit to Blackwing was so light, along with Vayu being a good support piece, that Blackwings were still competitively viable, and it even won SJC Orlando shortly after Vayu's release and before Silverwind. The deck also had Dark End Dragon, being one of the few decks that could summon the card, but the downside was that you'd have to win an SJC to obtain one at this time, or pay a hefty price tag to obtain it, but you would use it if you had a copy. In March of 2010, Blackwings took yet a second direct hit with Black Whirlwind going to 2, along with an indirect hit of Allure of Darkness going to 1. We also had new generic synchros that Blackwings could use, like Brian Knight Dragon the Ice Barrier and Ally of Justice Catastor. The later Blackwings wouldn't struggle with due to all their monsters being dark, so they could run it over if the opponent would run Catastor. This was the status of Blackwings going into SJC Edison, and it would be a viable deck heading into this event. Blackwings managed to still end up in the top 16 of Edison, but being one of the most popular past formats for players to play, you would see Blackwings as one of the most common decks in Time Wizard events going off Edison format, which is nice in hindsight since everybody would have easier access to Dark End Dragon compared to 2010 when it was still an SJC prize card. After Edison, Blackwings would remain in this status for most of 2010, and though they would get more support once again in the Shining Darkness, none of it would be strong enough to make an impact in the deck. It was still a contender after Edison, going against decks like Quick Draw, Dandy Warrior, Zombies, Frog Monarch, Gladiator Beast, and Machine and Gadget, pre the Shining Darkness, and later face strategies like Frog FTK, Inferno Infernity and X-Sabers after the set was released. Infernity nor X-Sabers, however, would be full power going into the 2010 World Championship, since Infernity had access to neither Infernity Barrier from the TCG side or Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier from the OCG side, and most of the good X-Saber support was TCG exclusive, making it not legal for the event. The main threat post the Shining Darkness that Blackwing had to deal with was Frog FTK, helping Blackwings take 2 with the top 4 spots in the 2010 World Championship and ending in the runner-up spot behind Frog FTK. After the 2010 World Championship, it was clear that Blackwings would still perform in the meta. So while going for cards like Infernity Barrier, Substitute, and Rescue Cap to hit the best decks of the format, Blackwings would take yet another hit in Black Whirlwind, with it going to 1, meaning both Gale and Black Whirlwind would be limited before the release of Storm of Ragnarok and the release of the new Legendary 6 Samurais, though it was still felt that Blackwings could perform at a high level 2 years after the archetype released. So Kalut would take the final hit for the Blackwing archetype by going to 1 in March of 2011. Blackwings would only get a singular top after Kalut took the hit, before all the limits to the archetype and the power creep to the deck would finally catch up, and it would not see YCS success for a couple of years. Blackwings lay dormant for the remainder of 2011 and all of 2012 as power creep got to be way too much for Blackwings in its current 3-2-1. Blackwings lay dormant for the remainder of 2011 and all of 2012 as power creep got to be way too much for Blackwings in its current iteration, competing against decks like Tengu Plant and TG Agents before having to face strategies like Dino Rabbit, Wind Up, and Zector and Chaos Dragons. Thankfully, Konami wouldn't keep Blackwings on the list for too long, with Kalut moving to 2 in September 2012 and then later to 3 in March of 2013. Black Whirlwind would later follow up in September 2013 by going straight from 1 to 3 after a format where Dragon Ruler and Spellbooks both dominated. This would be all that Blackwings would need to see play once again as YCS Toronto in 2013 in a format where Dragon Rulers were still strong, along with strategies like Post Judgment Spellbooks, Mermail, Atlantean, and Firefist also competing, and Xyz Infernity being in its early stages. Blackwings would end up in the top 4 of this event. The deck had no Brionic, no Goyo Guardian for generic level 6 synchros, having to make do with HTS Simuth as the best generic level 6 if Armed Wing wasn't going to cut it. Blackwings could also use the new Xyz mechanic to make generic rank 4s along with a monster like number 66 Master Key Beetle due to being a dark deck with level 4s, and Blackwings receiving Blackwing Zephyros the Elite for a good level 4 that can revive itself by bouncing a card, which could be a Blackwing like Bora or Gale who could just summon itself, or Black Whirlwind that you could reactivate. Toronto would be the last time Blackwings would perform at the YCS level, but it would remain a regional deck from that point onwards, as the deck would be revisited several times over the years. October 2014 would bring Gale the Whirlwind to 2 finally, and it would go to 3 the very next format in January of 2015 to once again put Blackwings at full power. The deck would also receive a ton of support thanks to Crow returning in the anime and Arc V, along with Konami printing the Blackwing support that remained manga exclusive to the 5Ds manga. Blackwing Gladius the Midnight Sun is a level 3 non-tuner you could special summon if the only monster you controlled is a Blackwing monster, and Blackwing Chris the Crack of Dawn is another level 4 to special summon by controlling any Blackwing. But unlike Bora, you could only summon Chris once a turn that way, though it is a 1900 attack monster for Black Whirlwind. Blackwing Harmattan the Dust is a level 2 with a summoning condition similar to Chris, but on summon it can also target a Blackwing to have its level increased by the level of the targeted monster. Blackwing Orochi the Squall is also similar in this regard, but it's a level 1 tuner you can use for synchro summons. Besides those Blackwings with summoning conditions we were used to from the first wave of Blackwings, the archetype would receive more monsters to help consistency in swarming. Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow is a level 5 tuner you could summon from the hand if you control no monsters, and can give you 2 tokens. While the tokens couldn't be used as tribute or synchro material, they could be used as link fodder as the deck goes into the Link era. Blackwing Pinaki the Waxing Moon, try saying that 10 times fast, is a level 3 tuner you could only use to synchro summon a Blackwing, but would search for a Blackwing monster from the deck at the end of the turn if it was sent from the field to the grave. Finally, we got Blackwing Steam the Cloak, who summons a token when it leaves the field, and once per turn contribute a monster to revive itself, going well with the token to sacrifice it in exchange for your level 3 tuner, though Steam the Cloak required you to use only Blackwings for synchro summons involving it. Blackwings would receive new synchros as well, and we see the old synchros from the 5Ds era be power creep to where they no longer had a place in the deck. Blackwing Nothung the Starlight is a generic level 6 synchro that deals 800 damage to the opponent and debuffs an opponent's monster attack by 800 on synchro summon, but each turn it could also let you normal summon a Blackwing from your hand in addition to your normal summoner set for the turn to help trigger Black Whirlwind even more. Blackwing Tamer Obsidian Hawk Joe is a synchro you can only use Blackwings to synchro into, but it can revive a level 5 or lower wing beast each turn, and it can redirect a targeting effect or attack on a monster you control to a Blackwing monster that would also be an appropriate target. Finally, we get to the Assault Blackwings, who are all generic synchros that treat themselves as tuners if you use a Blackwing to synchro summon them. Assault Blackwing Soheya the Rainstorm is a level 5 who revives any Assault Blackwing from the graveyard on synchro summon and can banish another copy itself from the graveyard to revive itself from the grave. Assault Blackwing Raikiri the Rain Shadow, again try saying these names 10 times fast, Jesus Christ, is a level 7 synchro who targets and destroys cards the opponent controls up to the number of other Blackwings you control, while Assault Blackwing Chidori the Rain Sprinkling, Jesus, what are these names, is a second level 7 who gains 300 attack for each Blackwing in your grave and revives another Winged Beast synchro from the grave when destroyed. Finally, they got a boss monster in the level 12 Assault Blackwing, Lord help me, Onimaru the Divine Thunder, who cannot be destroyed by card effects, can copy the level of a Blackwing in your grave, and gains a whopping 3,000 attack during the damage step if it was synchro summoned using only synchros. Blackwings would enter the Link era with all those aforementioned tools, as cards like Shura, Collude, and Armor Master start to no longer be enough to be worth running in the deck. Link monsters are not the biggest hassle for Blackwings to make their plays, since they have decent swarming, though that does mean fewer synchros you can make. Thankfully, we would get support for Blackwings in 2018 with the support cards in White Dragon Abyss. This wave gave Blackwings 3 relevant support cards to help boost the strategy. Blackwing Simoon the Poison Wind is the best of the support wave, being one of the best starters for Blackwings, since while you control no monsters, you can banish a Blackwing from your hand to place a Black Whirlwind from your deck onto the field, and then normal summon the Simoon without tributing or using your proper normal summon for the turn, with the only downside being that you're locked to summoning dark monsters from the extra deck, and Black Whirlwind goes to the grave at the end of the turn, while dealing you 1,000 damage. There are more than enough good dark monsters to summon from the extra deck to not worry about the former, and the latter isn't relevant if you get to make your plays. This easily gets Blackwing started into their combos to synchro and link summon. Blackwing Auster the South Wind is a level 4 tuner for the deck who, like Blizzard, cannot be special summoned, but it can summon a banished Blackwing on normal summon and can banish itself from the grave to put a Black Feather counter on a Blackwing Dragon you control, or a Wedge counter on all face-up monsters the opponent controls that don't have one. This helps the new boss monster Blackwing Full Armor Master, a level 10 synchro you must use a Blackwing tuner to summon, but it is unaffected by other card effects, places a wedge counter on an opponent's monster who activates its effect, can let you take control of an opponent's monster with a wedge counter each turn, and during your end phase, can destroy all monsters on the field with a wedge counter. The White Dragon Abyss support was decent for Blackwings. They did attempt to make Blackwinged Dragon playable in the deck, but that wouldn't work until much later. Instead, the deck would combo into using some of the strong dark synchro monsters like Borreload Savage Dragon and Beals of the Diabolic Dragons, while also being able to do link plays with the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche to help use Phantom Knight's Fogblade for a negate, or the Phantom Knights of Shade Brigadine to make a rank 4 like Evil Swarm Nightmare, or more synchros in general. The support did give Blackwings another decent run at smaller events, and it would even top 4 at the Finland Nationals in 2019, but this is far from the last support for Blackwings, but it's the start of seeing some of the older Blackwings not being able to keep up anymore. Finally, in 2022, Blackwings would get their most recent wave of support to once again try to make Blackwinged Dragon a staple in the Blackwing deck, except this time it would actually work. Blackwing Sudri the Phantom Glimmer, again try saying these names 10 times fast, is a second starter for Blackwings, being a level 4 monster who on normal summon would allow you to search for any card that mentions Blackwinged Dragon in its effect text from the deck, and it also lets you tribute a monster to summon a level 2 token that's also a tuner, but your extra deck plays are limited to synchros for that entire turn if you do the latter part. The most common target would be Blackwing Vats, the Emblem of Wandering, since it's a level 2 tuner you can summon from the hand if you already control a Blackwing, and can send itself and any number of non-tuner Blackwings whose combined levels with this would equal 8 from the deck to the graveyard to summon a Blackwing Dragon from the extra deck, and locking your extra deck summons to dark monsters for the rest of the turn. And yes, while reading that sentence, I just realized I said Vats instead of Vada. It is Vada. I'm sorry. This could easily send Zephyros the Elite along with a level 2 target you can recover with Blackwing Shamal the Sandstorm, who is a level 4 tuner that can discard itself to activate Black Feather Whirlwind from the deck and can banish itself from the grave after you summon a Blackwing Synchro or Blackwinged Dragon to add a Blackwing monster from your graveyard to your hand. Black Feather Whirlwind is another continuous spell that once per turn, after you summon a Dark Synchro, you can summon a Blackwing monster or Blackwinged Dragon that's banished or in your graveyard with attack less than the monster summoned, but the soft once per turn on this card does make it a good target to return and reactivate with Zephyros. The monster that'll be recovered off Shamal from your Vada will likely be Blackwing Chinook the Snowblast, since it could send itself from the hand or field to the grave, along with a Blackwing Synchro or Blackwinged Dragon from the extra deck to the grave to drop an opponent's monster's attack by 700 and negate its effects for the turn, with this being a quick effect if you control a Dark Synchro. We finally get to the main reason to run Blackwinged Dragon, as it gets an upgraded form in Blackwinged Assault Dragon, a Synchro that needs a Synchro Tuner to summon, but it can either be properly Synchro summoned or summoned by banishing a Synchro Tuner and a Blackwinged Dragon from your field or grave. And in return, you get a monster who, each time the opponent uses a monster effect, will gain a black feather counter when it resolves and deal 700 damage to the opponent, and contribute itself as a quick effect with 4 more counters to destroy all cards on the field. Blackwings would get an actual Synchro Tuner in this support with Blackwing Boros Storm the Wicked Wind, a level 6 who needs a Dark Tuner to summon, but on Synchro Summon can send a Blackwing monster from your deck to the grave to have its level become that of the sent monsters, helping you climb into other Synchros while going to the grave for Assault Dragon summoning requirement. Other support from this time can sometimes see play in modern Blackwings as well. Blackwing Zonda the Dusk is a second target to send off of Vada, since you can banish itself from the graveyard to summon a level 5 or higher Blackwing from the deck, though you will take damage equal to that monster's attack. This can get a Simone onto the field, or you can use Assault Blackwing Kunai the Drizzle to adjust the level of a Synchro you control to a level between 1 and 8. Blackwing Twin Shadow is a normal trap for the archetype that shuffles a tuner and non-tuner Blackwing that's banished or in your grave back into the deck or extra deck to summon a Blackwing Synchro whose combined level equal that of both returned monsters, treating the summon as a Synchro summon. And this trap can be used from the hand if you control 2 or more Blackwing monsters. This finally gives us a use for Blackwing Silverwind the Ascendant for something that isn't a value target. Being able to pop 2 monsters the opponent controls whose defense is lower than this card's attack of 2800. Finally, we get Blackwing Sharnga the Waning Moon, who would come later in mid-2023. But it's a level 2 tuner who can summon itself from the hand if a monster with 2,000 or more attack is on the field, and can banish itself from the graveyard as a quick effect if you control a Blackwing Synchro to target a face-up card the opponent controls and destroy it once per duel. The most recent support for Blackwings has helped the archetype plenty. You don't see many of the old cards from Blackwings anymore in the strategy, with most of the cards from the first year of the archetype existing no longer seeing play in the deck, and it now being mostly the new stuff. But the essence of Blackwings is still there, and there are ways to play it. You can go into a heavy Synchro version trying to get multiple Dark Synchros onto the field and using Bysteals as hand traps. You can also use them as Synchro material to summon monsters, or you can go with a version using Raid Raptor Wise Tricks to extend your combos and making monsters like Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon and DDD Duo Dawn King Kali Yuga plays on the opponent's turn as a potential inboard piece. Both are decent ways to play the deck, and you could still do stuff with Rusty Bardiche. It also helps Blackwings that Synchros are no longer bound to being summoned to the extra monster zone or zones Link monsters point to, letting you summon multiple Synchros in a turn without Link summoning now. The deck has seen regional success since Darkwing Blast, or as we called it on the channel, Darkwing Boo Boo Stain, gave us these new cards, having access to fairly powerful plays that haven't been affected by the ban list all that much, meaning it'll be in a strong place when it gets even more support inevitably. The generic birds, the analysis of Blackwings as a strategy might be done, but I wanted to go over how some Blackwings have been used generically over the years as well. Gale the Whirlwind, of course, was one of the best Blackwings for more than just its role in the Blackwing deck. It was also one of the best generic tuners in the game, so strategies would run it to help them get over the opponent's monsters, and even use it to access Blackwing Armor Master since you only need a Blackwing tuner for summoning it. Zephyros the Elite has seen play in tons of decks that can get it into the graveyard and have targets to bounce to revive it to make Xyz and Link plays, while also being able to reuse the card you bounced. Gofu the Vague Shadow was one of the best Blackwings generically, being banned due to its ability to summon itself with 2 tokens to get into a Link 3 with the greatest of ease. Steam the Cloak would also be used for Link plays, mainly with it being a target to summon off of Crystron Halki Fibrax and Link away to get that token, which did eventually get Steam the Cloak banned as well before coming back with the banning of Halka Fibrax. Blackwings are one of the biggest fan favorite decks since release and appearing in the anime. It helped that early on in its lifespan, it was a viable meta strategy for 2 years and is one of the better decks in one of the most popular Time Wizard formats out there, that of course being Edison. Appearing at the World Championship for 2 years in a row is also big for an archetype, as not many can do such a feat, especially after winning the first World Championship it was legal for. Blackwings has had a ton of legacy support since it debuted 16 years ago, even being revived in the anime when Arc V aired for a time and getting even more support after that. The deck might not be recognizable when you look at the cards the deck plays anymore, but the idea of Blackwings remains, and it's bound to get new support again in the future, which will likely keep it on a regional level or maybe even exceeding that and being able to top YCS events once again. The future is unknown, but Blackwings have had a storied history overall. And that is an exhaustive retrospective of Blackwings. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, a like rating would really be appreciated. Please share these videos around, as these retrospectives do take a lot of work and I really do enjoy making them. And you don't even want to know how many takes I've had to do over and over again pronouncing some of these names. That was probably the most difficult part of making this video, as well as just doing all the research for Blackwings. I mean, it was crazy how much history this archetype has, especially with how long it's been around. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.